families, creating a lifetime of memories. Sadly, some families are denied these important moments due to the sad practice of alienation. These are families divided.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Families Divided TV. In this week's episode, attorney Chris Smith is going to be speaking to us about divorce. The transition from marriage to divorce is hard on everyone, but there are a number of proven tactics that will help children and parents transition in such a way that can make the divorce process less daunting, help guard against alienating behaviors by the other parent, and help the children find peace within the co-parenting reality they now find themselves in. Drawing from leading commentators and research on the subject, as well as his own personal experience, Chris Smith provides insight into best practices for the parent facing the initial stages of their divorce. This is really a strong segment. For those of you who are just now getting into the divorce proceedings, or even possibly have been into it for a while, this is really going to help you. So I really suggest you take notes on this. And this is, again, going to really be strong. And I really appreciate Chris doing this episode for us. We're going to be right back right after this message with attorney Chris Smith.
Divorce and co-parenting are a major life interruption for families, especially the kids, but also for parents and grandparents. And it's even worse in blame-filled, high-conflict cases. When parents engage in alienation by turning the kids against the other parent or grandparents, kids suffer. They're denied the opportunity to build the 4 big skills necessary for future resilience. New Ways for Families online class can help. Parents learn to use our popular BIF and EAR skills to calm the conflict and stop the hostile emails and texts. And we even have a class for kids and parents to learn together. Research shows a 75% improvement in joint parental decision-making after this course is taken, plus overall improvements for kids' well-being. Don't wait to make this affordable investment in your children's future and improve your well-being too. Start learning new ways for your family today at conflictplaybook.com.
Hello, I want to talk to you today about some issues that I think that are not talked about enough when we're talking about parental alienation, and that's going to be the topic of the first stages of your divorce process or your custody process. What do you do in those early stages of the process to try to help avoid parental alienation allegations or efforts by the other side to alienate you from your children? It's crucial that as we talk about guarding against parental alienation, we talk about the process of communication. We're talking about issues relating to parenting and co-parenting, and some tips that we can implement that are maybe going to help you navigate this process in a way that will help avoid any kind of problems. And so that's what I'm talking about today. PA is a very complex issue that impacts children, and it really starts on the first day of your process, and it might even have begun before the divorce filing was ever first filed. There's always going to be signs that there's going to be an effort by one party to potentially pull a child in their direction, and that's what we're talking about here. But sometimes there are things that are triggering that we can guard against, and so let's understand that as we enter into this. Just to define it so that we are all working from the same idea, parental alienation is the phenomenon of one parent deliberately undermining or interfering with a child's relationship with the other parent. And what we want to do today is talk about ways to effectively plan for and be proactive in focusing on the communication, the parenting style, and the co-parenting style, and the post-divorce relationship building that is necessary to try to avoid those parental alienation behaviors. Um, First thing I want to talk about is avoiding or maintaining open communication. It's crucial for moms and dads post divorce. And when I say post divorce, I'm referring to post petition, that first complaint or petition that was filed in the case, because it starts there. That's going to begin the foundation of what the relationship is going to be like between mom and dad as we co-parent moving forward. There are some strategies to improve on that co-parenting relationship, and the first and foremost, I think, is communication. Establishing and maintaining an open line of communication between the co-parents and between the parents is critical to that process, and engaging in discussions about the child's well-being and their education, their activities, ensuring that you're having those conversations early on. You need to be having that conversation from day one. If a divorce was anticipated, it's good to have that conversation before the filing is ever made. If you weren't anticipating and you were surprised by it, then you need to get past that initial shock of it. You need to get past the initial uh, anger, frustration, all the emotions that come with the fact that your spouse just filed divorce papers on you, and you didn't think that they were coming, and you didn't know they were coming. You didn't may not have even known there was an issue in your marriage that would have necessitated that. But after that wears off, or after you get past that, make sure that you're talking about what can we do for the kids to shield them, to help them, to get them through this process. And as you are communicating with that, the next thing you want to do in this process is create a co-parenting plan. Now that may not be written on paper, it may not even be something that's in an email format, but you need an idea as far as a co-parenting plan, as far as a plan of action that you two as parents are going to work with, as far as how we're going to help get through this, and work collaboratively to create an environment where the children feel like that they are heard, that they're loved, that they are prioritized, and that they aren't lost in the shuffle of the emotions that are going to be coming up as you are facing your own divorce. Um, you may work through a co-parenting plan with an attorney and make sure that you've got something in place that you can fall back on if there's disagreement. Make sure that you've included clear parenting time schedules so that you understand I'm going to have the children on these dates. You're going to have them on those dates. Make sure it's clear as far as how decisions are going to be made. What happens if the parents can't agree on where the child's going to play baseball this year, or where the child's going to go to the dentist? How are those decisions going to be made if there's disagreement? You want to try to get as close to no disagreement as possible. Now, obviously, that if you're going through a divorce, there's going to be disagreement. There's going to be hard feelings. There are going to be strong emotions on both sides. You don't get to that point in a marriage without having those things creep in. But as you come to grips with the fact that this is going to be the new reality moving forward, you have to get past the anger and the hardship and move toward what are we going to do for the kids. And that's where you need to start acting as a parent, not as a spouse, not as a wounded spouse, especially, because those are where the problems may lie. And we're going to come back and talk about some things that I have observed, some things that I would think that you need to be careful of. But these are tips. These are things that we want to implement. Always prioritize best interest of child in everything you do. As a parent, you have an obligation to your child to make sure that they are the number one priority as it relates to this process. And where a lot of issues arise when it comes to the issue of parental alienation is when you have one party prioritizing themselves over the children. And that can happen on either side. It can happen with the target parent, where the target parent is prioritizing themselves, and that has triggered the other parent or it's even triggered the children to not want to engage with that parent in some way. Uh, it may not be the other parent who is creating that alienating behavior. It may be you as the parent who is not prioritizing your children. If you're a parent who is spending a lot of time outside the home and you're a parent who is prioritizing your social agenda and maybe your own personal new reality now that you're about to be single, and the children see this, don't blame the other parent if the children look at you and say, we don't want anything to do with that. So that's something that you need to guard against from day one, is to make sure that that doesn't even begin, because that might be the triggering point, but the other parent could possibly use that to begin to further alienate the children down the road. If you are the alienating parent, you need to be careful not to prioritize your desire to spend 100% of your time with your children over the other parent. It's probably the most difficult thing for a loving parent to not be able to go in and put their children to bed every night as they have for the years leading up to the divorce. If you're a parent who reads, a bedtime story every night to your kids, gives them a kiss, tells them you love them, and you're not going to be able to do that every night like you have, that is a very emotional thing for any parent to have to go through. It would be very easy for you to prioritize your self-interest of having that every night over the interest of your children having a relationship with the other parent. Not very many people would even fault you for wanting that, but it is an alienating behavior because you're prioritizing your own interests over those of your children having a relationship with the other parent. And so be careful there, making sure that you're prioritizing the children, not just your own self-interest. And that can be any number of things. But I can tell you that that's where some of the most egregious alienating behavior begins, is when you start to prioritize self over that of the kids in many ways, different ways. If you're putting the kids first and you're making an effort to say, look, I want to make sure that the children have a relationship with both parents, and you set that in motion early on, then you are going to be viewed as having prioritized your children's well-being over your own. And the courts are going to recognize that in a lot of situations. And so it's going to buy you a lot of credibility to say, look, I love my children, but I want them to have a relationship with the other parent. I'm willing to facilitate that everywhere I can. And so make sure that is the priority as you enter into this process. You want to be flexible and cooperative. And this is something that, especially in those early months, that first month, that second month after the petition has been filed, when it is still raw and it is still emotional and it is still very easy to look at the other parent and ask, why are you doing this? What are you doing? Because you don't want this. It's very easy to be inflexible and uncooperative because you're mad, you're angry, but you have to put that aside and be flexible, be cooperative. Don't always demand it's my way or the highway. And if you can demonstrate flexibility in accommodating changes to the parenting schedule when that's necessary, if you have something on a Thursday night and it's your night, you want to ask the other parent if they want to have that night, be flexible with it. If they say no, don't make an issue out of it. Don't accuse them of prioritizing their own self-interest over the children just because they say no, I've got something else that I've already got scheduled. That's bad co-parenting. And so be flexible in that and work with the other side and demonstrate that flexibility. If you can cooperate with the other parent on matters that may require adjustments, unexpected changes, work schedules, events, that flexibility will foster a more cooperative atmosphere, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for an atmosphere of cooperation. And so when you're not cooperative, you're going to trigger alienating behaviors. And when you are prioritizing your own self-interest, you're going to trigger alienating behaviors. If you don't have a plan in place, you're going to trigger alienating behaviors. And so that's what we want to guard against in these first few months as a parent who is going through this process early on. You want to implement or consider attending co-parenting counseling sessions. This is something I've seen work really well. If you have a cooperative couple that are willing to go to co-parenting counseling sessions, and you can even implement or involve the children in that process, it can be very helpful and can also get you to a point in the dynamic that maybe isn't as raw, as painful, and as hurtful, and allows you to move past that a little bit quicker. Professional guidance is a great tool to improve communication, provide mechanisms for conflict resolution, strategies and tools to navigate this new reality that you're in. And so don't be afraid to use that. I'm not one that says everybody has to go to counseling, but I am one to say that if you need some tools and you need some help in navigating this process, don't don't avoid it. Don't avoid the process, the counseling. Um, I have a friend who told me at one point every adult over the age of 25 should be in counseling in some form. There are those who might think that, and then there's those who say I'll never go to counseling. It's a waste of time. You don't have to be on the extreme on either side. Just use the professional tools that may be at your disposal to get you through this process. Um, One of the things that we're seeing a lot too are professional communication tools, whether it's Our Family Wizard, uh, some of the other options that are available to parents to uh, communicate with one another. Uh, don't be don't be afraid to use those things. Uh, Technology can really help facilitate communication. If you don't want to pay for a third party application like Our Family Wizard, set up a Google calendar that's just for the kids, just for kids events. That's a great tool to make sure that, okay, the kids have something here and here and here, and we're going to make sure that's on the calendar and the joint calendar. I've had clients who have really been successful early on, especially, and then on into the co-parenting relationship, just making sure that they have used joint technology tools. Use email, use messaging apps. Make sure that the communication between the two parties uh, is not always over the phone, especially as you get into later months after your divorce, maybe even is finalized. You're going to want to use email and messaging apps as much as you can. If you have a co-parenting relationship where you can talk to the other parent, you have that really ideal co-parenting dynamic. Great. That's you really don't need a whole lot of help because you're already light years ahead of a lot of parties. And it really, to be honest with you, that requires one party making the commitment that that's what they're going to do. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Make sure to attend school events and extracurricular activities. Don't neglect those things. Uh, Kids notice it, the other parent notices it, and it is a triggering event under certain circumstances that could lead to alienating behaviors and alienating outcomes. If you never attend your child's extracurricular activities, you never attend school events, and then you expect the child to want to have the same relationship with you that they have with the other parent who does attend those events, you're really missing the point. I could understand why you may be divorced because you're just not recognizing reality. You have to put the time and effort in as a parent to make sure that your children understand that they are a priority and that you are prioritizing them. Because if they feel that you're not, they absolutely will pick up on it. I don't care how old they are. They definitely can determine who is prioritizing them when it comes to their parents. And so that can be an issue that leads to further alienating behaviors if you're not prioritizing your children. So attend those parent-teacher conferences, attend school events, attend performances, make sure you go into sporting events, um, make sure you're involved, demonstrate your commitment. It really does reinforce and help to make sure that you have a good, strong co-parenting relationship and that you have a strong relationship with your children post-divorce. Don't allow yourself to fall prey to the depression that comes with it, the uh, the unwillingness to participate. If mom's going to be there, I'm not going. That's the worst attitude, and one that is going to result in you're probably not going to get custody. You're probably going to trigger certain alienating behaviors and certain alienating outcomes that may not even be the fault of the other party, because you're just not prioritizing that joint effort to try to make a commitment to your kids. Um, and on that note, avoid negative communication. It's really hard. I'll be the first one to say, as someone who's been there and done that, it is very hard not to respond to something that you believe is an outright lie. It's very hard not to respond to something that you think is degrading. It's very hard to respond to attacks, to personal attacks. It's hard to respond to these negative or disparaging comments that come as a result of the divorce. And that's going to happen. There are going to be comments, there are going to be text messages, there are going to be uh, things that you're going to see that were said to his attorney or her attorney that are going to come to back to you, and you're going to say that's just a lie, and it's going to trigger you, and you're going to want to respond to it. Do the best you can to refrain from that. Try not to engage in negative communication. Try not to make disparaging remarks. I don't care how bad the other parent is. If you want a co-parenting relationship with that other parent, you're going to have to look past some very negative qualities because we all have them. Every one of us as parents none of us are perfect. And that's something to keep in mind. None of us are perfect. The other parent may not be perfect, but we're going to try to make sure that that we're co-parenting with them, because bear in mind, in a child's eyes, every parent is perfect until the child grows up and realizes that they weren't. And you can't do anything about that. But they're going to think that mom is perfect regardless of what she's doing in her extracurricular life. They're going to think that dad is perfect regardless of what dad is doing that he shouldn't be doing. They're going to think that both parents are perfect because they're the children of those parents. And you need to make sure that you do everything you can to avoid a negative environment as it relates to the other parent. Don't engage in negative comments, especially in front of the kids. Don't engage in negative comments or negative arguments or things that could contribute to alienating activity that's going to impact the kid's perception of the other parent. Um, it's very common, and I think it's probably one of the more acute indicators of alienating activity to see negative comments being made about the other parent to the children. Now, I will tell you, just because a child says a negative comment about another parent does not mean that that child got it from the other parent. Okay. Children, I don't care what age they are, if they do not feel that you are committed to them as a parent, or they don't feel that you're prioritizing them in this process, they are going to pick up on it and they're going to make negative comments about the other parent. It's not always the other parent's fault. So it's real easy within this world to assume that if a child is saying something negative about the other parent, it must be coming from the other parent. Doesn't always have to be that way. And so that's why if a child is walking away from the other parent, it doesn't always have to be that the other parent is the source. It could be justifiable. And I think that's a question that always has to be asked by any attorney who's representing a client who is making an alienating or making an allegation of parental alienation, as we are professionals within the field, and whether it's therapists, counselors, psychologists, guardian ad litems, attorneys, when we are reviewing this issue, we always have to ask, is there justification for the children refusing a relationship with the other parent that isn't related to the other parent? So be mindful of that as you enter into this process in the early stages. You don't want to give your kids any reason to walk away from you, uh, any more than you want to give the other parent reason to alienate you either. Okay, so very important to keep that in mind. Um, Seek legal advice, consult with a family law attorney, understand the rights and dynamics here. Now, be very leery of a family law attorney who immediately goes right into seeking full custody in your dynamic. No matter what is said to them, be very careful of that, because there is a world within the family law community where chaos and infighting and creating disagreements within the family dynamic facilitates more success for the attorney. Telling on my profession, but I've seen it, I've experienced it, I know it. Um, if a family law attorney can sow chaos within that dynamic, that co-parenting dynamic, more likely to litigate that case out, requiring more attorney's fees. Be careful. If the first thing that is said is we're going to go after full custody, that's they're immediately sowing the seed of disagreement. They're sowing the seed that's going to hurt your kids. Now, if you have valid reasons to go after full custody, maybe there's substance abuse issues, maybe there's abuse issues, maybe there is some dynamic there at play that really necessitates it. Justify it beyond simply you're a better parent than the other. And there needs to be some justification for it moving into that world, because once you go down that road, you really are creating a world where you're going to lob the first bomb, they're going to lob a bomb back at you, and then the bombs are just going to keep flying. There's going to be next allegation, next allegation, next allegation. And next thing you know, you've been in court for 2 years trying to figure out who's going to have custody. Your kids are suffering. They're not doing very well. You're suffering. You're broke because you've been paying it to your attorney the whole time. You're not able to move on with your life. And it's everybody loses. Everybody loses. So be mindful of that as you meet with an attorney for the first time, as you meet with someone who's going to help navigate you through this. They should be counseling you to try to get to a point that's best for your children, not best for their end result, what's best for your children. Okay, so that's where you really want to look at that, because if you can test their theories and your theories about what's best for your kids, feel good about it, you can move forward with confidence, and it's going to be a better situation for you in your case. And so as you go through this process, you absolutely need to seek legal counsel, seek advice from a qualified family law attorney, and make sure you understand your rights and that those rights are well defined. But then be very careful about who you hire, because there are going to be those who will try to facilitate more litigation. Just be mindful of that. Document communications and agreements. Make sure that everything is documented. Keep records of communication. Keep records with the other co-parent. Document those agreements related to any kind of changes in parenting time, financial responsibilities, any of those things. If you have an expense that's been incurred with the other parent that the other parent needs to help pay for, send that expense as soon as you incur it. Make sure they have a justification for the expense. If they ask for something such as, well, do you have a receipt? Don't get mad. Don't start questioning them as if, well, you don't trust me. This is indicative. This is why we got divorced. It's not going to help anything. Okay, so be careful. And if they want a receipt, get them a receipt, send it to them before they even have to ask for it. And that's going to facilitate trust. It's going to build a better relationship so the two of you can co-parent. And you've got a record there that I sent that, and that person needs to reimburse me. If you don't send the receipt, chances are you're not going to get reimbursed for it. Okay, so those are 10 things that we've talked about so far that I think if you can implement these things early on in your case, you're going to be much better off. And just to recap, we want to maintain open communications. We want to develop a co-parenting plan. We want to prioritize the child's best interest. We want to be flexible, be cooperative as much as we possibly can. We want to utilize professionals such as counselors to help us learn better skills to co-parent. We want to communicate with technology and the tools that are available to us. We want to attend events and extracurricular activities as much as we possibly can to show our children that they're a priority. We want to avoid any negative communications with the other side, and we definitely don't want to talk negatively about the other parent to the children. We want to seek qualified, competent, and ethical legal advice, and we want to make sure we document the communication between the parties. Those are 10 things that I think if you implement those things, you're going to be much better off from day one, in terms of your process here. If you can improve your communication between the parties, and you may have been terrible communicators when you were married. You may have not been able to have a conversation that did not result in a fight. You've got to get past that on both sides. You have to get past that because you're now partners in raising children. You're not partners in life anymore. You're partners in helping raise these kids. And it's a business relationship between the two of you. Your parenting with that child is going to be one-on-one when you have that child. But you're in partnership, and there's a business relationship there as to the final outcome that we're trying to create is a healthy, happy, well-adjusted child who does not have a lot of the baggage that comes with being the child of a divorce. Because we all know that it's there, and we all know it's possible, and we know that that statistics are that the cycle is just going to be perpetuated. You want to break that cycle. Well, here you are. You are in the cycle. Your divorce is happening. Now you want to do what you can to try to make sure that the next generation doesn't perpetuate that cycle. And that's where we want to improve our communication and do these things we're talking about. Let's talk about some pitfalls. We've talked about some things to do. I want to talk about some things not to do now. These are pitfalls to guard against in the initial months. And what I'm looking at is when the divorce is filed in the first 60 days of your case. We want to look at what is happening, and let's talk about these things. And I'm going to be one who's going to, I'm telling on myself, my profession, and I've already done a little bit of that. You want to avoid court as much as possible. You are not going to win your ex-spouse back by going to court. You're not going to prove that you were right and he was wrong by going to court. You're not going to reach absolution and understanding by going to court. So you need to refrain from viewing your divorce as a battleground between two warring factions. And you need to try to resolve these disputes without the need for a judge doing it. That being said, I want to clarify. There are situations, and as an attorney, this is what most of the cases I'm involved in are cases where there is no option. One party has taken the position that they're going to withhold visitation, or they've taken the position that they want full custody and they're not going to work with you. Okay, they've already made that decision before we even get to respond. In those situations, you don't have an option. I mean, now you can try to co-parent, you can try to communicate, you can do all the things we just talked about to try to improve that dynamic, and you should. But when you don't have an option, you have to go to court. There are only two ways to get you through a divorce. The two of you can come to an agreement, or you can go to court and the judge will do it. And it's never going to be the outcome that you're really going to want when the judge does it. You're going to lose control, and you're going to have a harder relationship down the road as you move forward. So if you have to give on something and you have to give up something in order to foster a more collaborative environment with your co-parent, you need to do that rather than to have a showdown in a courtroom, because it's not going to help anybody, especially not the kids. Take that money, take them on a Disney cruise. Your relationship will be a whole lot better with your kids and even with your ex-spouse. Don't withhold information. Okay. You need relevant information should go both ways. In Oklahoma, where I practice primarily, uh, medical information, education information is statutorily provided to both parents. You can't withhold that or tell the school, don't send that to dad. Um, so withholding information, not sending the receipt, not sending the information before the doctor's appointment uh, is conducted, that's only going to contribute to mistrust and exacerbate the conflict between the two parties. It's not going to help anybody, and it's not going to help your kids. So don't withhold information. All right. Don't communicate negatively. If you have to shut it down and not say anything and turn your phone off, do so. If you have to call a friend and complain to that friend about what just was said or what was just done and get it out of your system before you respond, do that. But steer clear of negative communication, especially in the presence of the child. Don't let it happen. If the other party comes at you and starts wanting to fight and argue, just respond. Let's don't do this in front of the kids. If they continue, you can't do anything about it. If you're living in the same home with your spouse as you go through the divorce, these things are going to happen because you're going to have conversations that the kids are going to overhear. Kids are listening to everything that they can hear. So it's going to happen. Try to steer clear of it. Don't let that be a common occurrence. It can trigger some alienating activity by the other parent. It can trigger alienating responses in the children. Okay, so be careful. Don't go through this and say, well, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. I'm not going to do what the court tells me I've got to do. Failing to comply with a court order is going to be an easy way to lose custody of your kids. Strictly comply with it. Failure to comply will have legal consequences, and it may even cost you the relationship that you want with your kids. That goes especially for substance prohibitions within your custody order. If you have a prohibition against drinking or drinking to excess, do not abuse that. If you have a prohibition for having a party, a third party that you're romantically involved in over at the home, don't abuse that. Comply with those things. Those things are there because, one, for years, that's been a tried and true way to try to protect the children in this process. And so the well-being of your kids is at stake in this. And so comply with those orders. Fifth and last thing in the pitfall, do not let your emotions get the better of you. This is probably the hardest of all of the five: avoiding court, withholding information, negative communications, failing to comply with court orders. The fifth one, allow the emotions to get the better of you. That's going to be a problem for a lot of us. It can happen to any of us. I don't care where you're coming from in your life. It's easy because emotions are a very powerful thing. So how do we manage those things? How do we manage emotions during this process so that they don't get the better of us? Because one of the hardest things within a co-parenting dynamic in the early stages is to put aside the very raw and powerful emotion that you're dealing with as it relates to your marriage falling apart and the other spouse leaving you. The very difficult thing that you're going through has to be set aside in order to co-parent with that person. The person who you view as breaking your heart, breaking your marriage up, breaking your family up, you have to now put that aside and let's create an environment where we can co-parent. Otherwise, the judge isn't going to let you have joint custody. If you can't co-parent, you can't have joint custody. And what we want in any dynamic is to try to say, okay, both parents can have an equal opportunity. Both parents matter. You've heard me say it before. I'll continue to say it again. Both parents matter, and those kids need a relationship with both parents. And so that's where we want to make sure that we want to get our emotions out of the way so we can do that. Seek emotional support. Friends, family, therapist. Friends first. Friends are there to be your friend through this process. Your family's there because they're going to love you through it no matter what. And your therapist is there because you're paying them to be. So prioritize friends, family, therapist, and share your feelings, receive the emotional support that you need, and then have that support system available so that you can talk to them as you need to cope with the emotional challenges that you're dealing with. Secondly, prioritize self-care. This is something I've written about, talked about. I cannot stress it enough. If you're going through a divorce, that needs to be the trigger for you to become the best version of yourself. In all respects, your divorce should be the triggering mechanism for you becoming a better version of the person you were yesterday. Take care of yourself physically. Start exercising again. If you haven't been doing it, start exercising again. You're going to need to get back out on the market anyway, so losing a few pounds ain't going to hurt you. Work on your mental well-being, your emotional and mental well-being. Reconnect spiritually with a higher power. Make sure that you are being faithful to your faith. That will help you in times when you don't have anybody else there to help you. And engage in activities that you enjoy doing. If you had a favorite thing, a favorite movie, a favorite place, a favorite restaurant, a favorite anything, habit, you'd like to read a book at night, but you couldn't do it because your spouse wanted to turn the light off, do the thing that you enjoy doing that you haven't been able to do since you've been married. It's an opportunity now to get back out there and do the things that you used to really enjoy. Reclaim that territory of yourself and your identity. That's how you prioritize that self-care. Reclaim it. If you had a place that was your place that you used to go to and you used to enjoy going to it, and you didn't get to do it anymore because your spouse didn't like going, reclaim it. Go take it back. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Taking care of yourself will impact everything. A note on substances. I live in Oklahoma, and it seems like on every corner we have a dispensary shelling out marijuana. I know a lot of states are in the same boat. Be very careful. In Oklahoma, it's not necessarily allowed to be used against you in your case, but judges are cognizant of it, and they're growing more skeptical of the fact that marijuana is now prescribed. Be careful how you're using it. Especially do not use it around the kids. Do not smoke when you got the kids. It's a quick way to hurt yourself in your case. Be careful as far as your drinking. We talked about reaching out to friends. It's very easy in this process to go meet a friend at a bar, sit there for 3 hours and have too many drinks and get in your car, drive home, and get yourself a DUI. That's a quick way to lose custody of your kids. It's a quick way to lose an opportunity to co-parent those children through this process. So be very cognizant and careful of what you're putting in your body, what you're doing with yourself, and where you're prioritizing the processes and habits that are getting you through this. Seek professional guidance. We talked about it. Emotional issues are well within the purview of a counselor and a therapist. So don't be afraid to consult with one. Records relating to your counseling are sealed. They're confidential. They're not going to get in. They should not get into any case. Okay. Unless there's a really egregious thing where the counselor would have to disclose anyway. They should be confidential. So don't stress that. Okay. Take advantage of that opportunity to alleviate the anxiety that's coming from this process, reduce emotional stress, talk about the things that you want to talk with your attorney about or with your friends, but you're scared to talk to them. Talk to a counselor. Set realistic expectations. Okay, understand that divorce is a very challenging process and it's not going to be smooth. If it's a smooth one, God bless you. But set realistic expectations for what this is going to look like. The process, the outcomes. You're not going to be able to keep everything you want. You're not going to be able to get everything you want, and you have to go into it understanding that. But I also want to stress this too. Realistic expectations include setting a real clear objective that you're going to co-parent. That's where it starts. Avoiding parental alienation in any case begins when both parents commit to co-parenting. If you're not going to commit to it, you're going to have problems. If the other side's not committed to it, there's going to be problems. If you're not committed to it, there's going to be problems. So commit to co-parenting first, and make that the objective. Okay. Focus on your future. That includes being a co-parent, but it also includes planning that you have a wide open field to go run into. And if you're going to be dwelling on your past grievances and the heartbreak and the heartache, it's going to be harder for you to move into that next chapter. Set some goals for yourself. Envision a positive post-divorce life and shift your focus away from the negative emotions of what you just lost and start to move that focus to what is possible, because you now have a opportunity to go do the things you couldn't do when you were married. And there are always things that you wanted to do that you couldn't do because you had to be cognizant of your spouse. And if you're the one who wasn't cognizant of your spouse and you were not neglecting things you wanted to do, but you were mindful because you wanted to make sure you were including your spouse, that's probably why you're getting a divorce. So be cognizant of that and go take advantage of the things you want to do. Embrace mindfulness meditation. Practice mindfulness meditation. This is a really good way, and I think it's becoming much more mainstream to engage in mindfulness routines. Stay centered, stay calm. I include prayer within the mindfulness category, but take advantage of it. Use an app, whatever your technique is. Don't be afraid to engage in that. And then again, we come back to communicating effectively. Choose your communication method and engage in it. Number 8 recommendation is to create boundaries. It's going to help you from an emotional perspective, establish clear boundaries to protect your emotional well-being. That includes, don't Facebook stalk or Instagram stalk your ex. I would recommend probably just not getting off social media for a little bit, clearing your mind. It's not going to hurt you. Avoid communication about the past. Avoid what ifs. Avoid once that divorce is in place, move on. And avoid the confrontational discussions about the issues as to why the divorce had to happen in the first place. Be practical, be a co-parent. Use mediation where you need to. Don't be afraid to use mediators to try to work through differences. It's sometimes there are issues that a third party's needed to facilitate a constructive dialogue. And if you would have utilized a third party to try to navigate those communication differences, you might be still married today. But a neutral third party can help facilitate a constructive conversation that's necessary to make sure that you maintain that co-parenting relationship and don't trigger alienating behaviors. And always keep your children in mind. Keep the children in mind throughout every step. Do not lose sight of the fact that the vast majority of the time that you're going to spend with your kids is going to be spent before they turn 18. You now have had your time cut in half. So you're going to have less time than you were to begin with. Do not mess that up. Take advantage of every opportunity. Prioritize your kids. When you have them, make sure that they are the priority. Do not sit in front of your TV or spend your night drinking your bottle of wine and commiserating. Prioritize the kids, make them the priority. as we finish up, I'm going to say that there are a number of resources that I've found to help. One of them that I can say that is have found really helpful is a book by Tammy Daughtry. It's called Co-Parenting Works: Helping Your Children Thrive After Divorce. I've recommended this to others. I've read it myself. I think it's a very helpful and practical book for those who are going through it. There are a lot of other books out there to help with conversations with kids through this process, helping the process to move forward. Take advantage of those things. And so the intent today is to make sure that you understand that from the day one, when your divorce has been filed, your obligation is to try to move past the emotional chaos that is going on in your mind and prioritize your kids. And to do that, you're going to have to put aside some justifiable hurt, some justifiable anger, some justifiable accusations in order to co-parent well. And again, both parents matter, and both parents need to be involved in the lives of their children. And to avoid alienating activities, start at the very beginning, making sure that you're putting those prioritizing the kids. You can't control the other side. What they do, they're going to do. And hopefully they adopt the same mentality of co-parenting through this process, but you can't control them. You can only control what you can control. And I think if you'll take the things that we've talked about today and implement those things, I think it'll be very helpful in terms of avoiding alienating activities, strengthening the relationship with your children, strengthening the relationship with the other co-parent, and making sure that your children have an opportunity to get to the other side of this divorce in a way that maybe they won't recreate it in the future, and that the cycle could stop with them. And so let's work towards that end. And if there's anything I can do, my email address is always chris@thesmithfirm.net. Chris@thesmithfirm.net will get to me. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk and help anybody that can that wants to talk to navigate this process. And so if there's anything we can do, let us know. We're happy to do it.
Next week on Families Divided TV, Dr. Mandy Mathewson discusses From Alienation to Reunification, research highlights and recommendations.